The body arrived at the morgue just before midnight. Male mid-40s, no identification. He'd been found lying by a dirt road, face covered in mud, hands clenched tight as if holding on to something unseen. The gravedigger August had worked there for nearly 30 years. He had seen everything: burned bodies, drowned ones, men torn apart by accidents. But there was something about this one that made his stomach turn. The face, even lifeless, seemed aware, as if it was waiting. When he began to prepare the corpse for burial, August noticed something strange. The man's skin was still warm. He checked the time. The death certificate said the man had been gone for almost 5 hours. "Doctor's mistake," he muttered, forcing out a dry laugh. But no sound came. Later, under the full moon, August worked alone in the cemetery. The wind moved through the trees, and the rhythm of the shovel cutting into the dirt echoed through the night. The coffin was simple, dark wood, waiting by the open grave. He placed the body inside, whispered a small prayer, and began to nail the lid shut. Then came the sound, a dull, heavy thump. From inside the coffin, 3 slow knocks. August froze. His heart raced. He looked around, nothing but silence and the whisper of the wind. He pressed his ear against the lid. Nothing. "I'm just tired," he said softly, trying to believe it. He raised the hammer again, but before the next nail hit, a voice came from the other side. Raspy, weak, distant. "I'm not finished." The hammer fell from his hand. He stumbled back, staring at the box. No one else was there, yet the voice continued. Trembling, human, desperate. "Let me come back." Every instinct told him to run, but something deeper, something he couldn't explain, forced him to stay. With shaking hands, he began to pull the nails out, one by one. When he lifted the lid, the candlelight flickered across the man's face. The eyes were open, fixed on him. "I told you," the corpse whispered, lips cracking as it spoke. "I asked to come back." August staggered backward, breath caught in his throat. The dead man sat up, slowly, painfully, bones creaking with each movement. "You don't understand," he said, smiling with a mouth that seemed too wide, too human. "I came back, but in the wrong body." The last thing August saw was the corpse rising to its feet, the sound of the earth groaning beneath it. By dawn, the cemetery was silent again. The coffin lay open. Inside was a body, but not the one buried the night before. It was August, and his face was still warm. The cemetery was never silent, even on nights when the wind was still and the sky lay heavy and black. The earth whispered. It shifted, it sighed, it groaned, and sometimes it moved. No one knew this better than Harlan, the caretaker of St. Mercy's Cemetery. He had worked there for 22 years, living alone in a small cabin by the gates, keeping watch over the rows of graves that stretched like broken teeth across the hill. He had buried more bodies than he could count, but he remembered them all, where they were, how they looked, the way the earth felt after it closed around them. The dead were quiet, predictable. They stayed where they were placed, until one night, one didn't. It began on a Tuesday. Rain had soaked the ground for 3 days straight, leaving the paths soft and muddy. When Harlan went out with his lantern for the evening round, he noticed it a single grave, freshly sunken, like the ground had inhaled. The nameplate read, Lydia Crane, 1974 to 2024, had been buried only 4 days before. Her family had wept so loudly that even the crows had gone silent. At first, Harlan thought it was normal settling. Heavy rain could shift the soil. He fetched his spade to even it out, humming softly to himself. But as he dug, the earth felt wrong, loose, cold, like something beneath had moved recently. He froze when he saw it, faint marks in the dirt, deep and narrow, as if fingers had clawed their way upward. He straightened, blinking through the rain. A trick of the light, maybe, but then came the smell, sweet, metallic, and unmistakably human. He stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. That night, he couldn't sleep. The storm raged, wind howling against the windows, rain hitting the roof like nails, and through the noise, Harlan swore he heard something else, faint, rhythmic, a hollow sound, thud, 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 coming from outside, from the direction of Lydia Crane's grave. He tried to ignore it, told himself he was old, tired, hearing things that weren't there. But the sound didn't stop. It came in intervals, steady and patient, like someone knocking. By dawn, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his coat, his lantern, and his shovel, and trudged out through the mist. The grave looked worse. The soil was heaving slightly, rising and falling like breath. He stood over it, heart pounding, whispering to no one, "Please, don't." Then the ground cracked open. The soil split, slow at first, then violently, the way ice breaks over a river. A pale hand pushed through the mud, thin, trembling, coated in black earth. Harlan staggered back. Dropping the lantern, the flame hissed out in the wet grass. For a moment, everything was dark. Then a low, muffled cry came from beneath. "Help me." He should have run. Every part of him screamed to run. But something in that voice, weak, pleading, human, rooted him to the spot. He fell to his knees, clawing at the dirt, shoving it aside until he saw her face. Lydia Crane, eyes open, mouth moving, still alive. He dug faster, adrenaline blinding his fear. "Hold on, I'm here." But when her arms broke free, her fingers gripped his wrist with unnatural strength. He gasped. Her skin was ice. "Please," she whispered, her lips trembling. "Don't put me back." He froze, staring into her eyes. They weren't the eyes of a woman rescued from death. They were glassy, deep, wrong. Something behind them was awake, something old. Before he could move, she lunged upward, dragging him closer. Her mouth opened wider than humanly possible, and she screamed. The sound wasn't just noise, it was pressure. It vibrated in his bones, in the air, in the ground. Every mirror in his cabin shattered. Every crow in the trees took flight. And then she was gone. The grave was still, the soil smooth again, as if nothing had happened. Harlan woke at sunrise, lying beside the grave. He didn't remember falling asleep. His hands were caked with dried mud. His lantern was gone. He stumbled to his feet, dizzy, unsure if it had all been a nightmare. But when he looked down, he saw it, fresh footprints beside the grave, bare, small, leading away toward the forest. He followed them without thinking. The tracks wound between the trees, across the stream, and up the hill behind the cemetery. There, among the fog, he saw her, Lydia, standing beside an old mausoleum, head tilted back, staring at the morning sun. Her dress was torn, her skin pale, but she was smiling. "Lydia," Harlan whispered. She turned slowly. Her eyes found him calm, almost kind. "I told you," she said softly, voice steady now. "I wasn't ready." He took a step forward, trembling. "You were dead." "I was," she said. "But it's so lonely there, so quiet, so cold." Her smile faded. "I asked to come back." "Didn't they tell you? The body always asks first." Harlan shook his head, backing away. "You shouldn't be here." Lydia tilted her head. "Neither should you." And before he could move, the mausoleum door behind her creaked open. Inside, rows of tombs lined the walls. Every lid was cracked, every grave disturbed, and from the darkness, whispers rose, dozens of them, layered, desperate, alive. Harlan turned to run, but the ground beneath him shifted. The soil rippled like water, swallowing his feet. Hands, hundreds of them, broke through the mud, grabbing, pulling, holding him down. He screamed, struggling, but the earth swallowed him inch by inch. The last thing he saw was Lydia watching from above, her expression blank. When the soil reached his chest, she spoke one last time. "Don't worry," she said softly. "They only take the ones who listen." And then the earth closed over him. By morning, the rain had washed everything clean. The grave of Lydia Crane was untouched, perfect, peaceful, still. But beside it, a new mound of earth had appeared. No name, no cross, just fresh, damp soil. When the next caretaker arrived a week later, he found the ground strange. Every night just before dawn, one grave would move. Not much, just a small tremor, like the earth shifting in its sleep. But if he listened closely, very closely, he could swear he heard breathing. The Gravedigger's Tale, the man who never died. My name is Jonas Hale, and for 41 years I have buried the dead. It is quiet work, and it keeps you humble. You learn things about people when you put them in the ground, how fragile they are, how much they pretend not to fear what's coming. But sometimes, when the shovel cuts deep enough, the earth whispers back, and that's when you learn something new. Not everything beneath it wants to stay buried. The story began in October of 1999, a night colder than usual. The funeral had ended hours before, but the coffin still sat above the grave. The family of the deceased, a man named Samuel Reed, had left in a hurry. They refused to stay for the burial. Something about the body unsettled them. They said his eyes had never quite closed, that even in the coffin, he looked alive. I didn't think much of it. People say strange things when they're grieving. So, after midnight, I came back to finish the job. The moon hung low over St. Adrian's Cemetery, and the wind moved through the trees like a voice half remembered. I took my lantern and began lowering the coffin into the ground. Everything was routine until I heard a faint tapping from inside the box. 3 knocks, then silence. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. The mind plays tricks in graveyards, especially at night. But then it came again, slow, deliberate, from the inside. I froze, my breath turned to smoke in the air. The sound stopped, then a voice followed, muffled but clear. Jonas, don't put me down there. Every muscle in my body locked. He had said my name. No one else was around. I knew Samuel Reed was dead. I had checked myself. I had touched his skin, felt the cold stiffness of his limbs. He was gone, and yet his voice was calm, pleading, alive. I backed away, my lantern trembling in my hand. Who's there? I whispered. The coffin shook once, softly like something inside had moved. Then came the voice again. You don't remember me, do you? The tone had changed. It wasn't pleading anymore. It was disappointed, like I had broken a promise. I stumbled backward until my heel caught the edge of another grave. I fell, the lantern spilling fire across the dirt before going out. For a moment, there was only darkness. When I lit it again, the coffin had shifted. It was tilted, half inside the grave, as if something had pushed it from below. I ran. The next morning, I told no one. I filled the grave, sealed it, and swore to myself I'd forget the whole thing. But that night, when I passed through the cemetery, I saw footprints in the mud, bare, human, fresh. They led from Samuel Reed's grave to the caretaker's shed. Inside, everything was still, but the air was different, colder, heavy with the smell of soil and decay. I turned, and there he was, sitting on the wooden bench, the lantern light catching his pale face. It was Samuel. He wasn't breathing. His chest didn't rise or fall, but his eyes followed me as I stepped back, shaking. Don't look at me like that, he said softly. You've seen me before. My mouth went dry. He stood, slowly, and the sound of his bones moving was like old wood bending in the wind. I'm not supposed to be here, he continued, but I never left. What do you want? I asked, voice trembling. He smiled. Nothing you can give. You just need to remember. He stepped closer, and I saw something that made my heart stop. His wrists were scarred, long, deep marks that circled them completely. I had seen those scars before, on my own hands. I stumbled backward, terrified. What are you? He tilted his head. You buried me once, but it wasn't my time. You closed the box, Jonas, and left me in the dark. You promised to come back. I tried to speak, but no words came. My throat felt tight, like something invisible was holding it shut. Samuel took another step forward, his bare feet leaving no prints in the dirt. When I screamed, you didn't answer, he whispered. When I clawed the wood, you walked away. I remembered, 20 years earlier, I had buried a man after an accident. The body was whole, but something about him had seemed wrong, warm to the touch. A faint pulse, I told myself, was a trick of nerves. The name on the stone had faded with time, but I knew it now. It was him. Samuel read. I'm sorry, I choked out. He stopped inches away, the lantern light flickering across his hollow face. It's too late for that. His hand reached forward and gripped my shoulder. Cold, impossibly strong. Everything went black. When I woke, I was in the grave. The coffin above me was open, the sky a small circle of gray far overhead. My hands were covered in mud, my fingers ached. I tried to stand, but something heavy pressed on my chest. Looking down, I saw a name carved into the lid above me. It wasn't Samuel Reed. It was mine. I screamed until my voice broke, but the sound died in the dirt. The grave smelled of damp wood and blood. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, and for a moment, I thought I heard footsteps above. Then a voice, calm, deep, familiar. "Don't worry, Jonas. I'll make sure you rest this time." The last thing I saw was his face peering over the edge, smiling gently. The soil began to fall, handful by handful, covering my eyes, my mouth, my breath. Now, when the night is quiet and the wind crawls across St. Adrian's Cemetery, I can still hear the earth moving. Sometimes the graves shift, sometimes the ground breathes, and if you stand close enough to my stone, you might hear something else. A knock, then a voice. I never died. The whisper from the coffin. They buried her on a Wednesday. The sky was gray, the kind that presses down on you until it feels like you're being smothered. Her name was Margaret Vale, and she had been the last patient at the old St. Jude Asylum before it shut down for good. No family attended her funeral. No one knew where she came from or what she had done to end up there. Only the priest and the gravedigger stood by the hole as the coffin was lowered. And when it was done, they walked away without a word. That night, the cemetery was silent, except for the sound of rain and the slow grind of the shovel, as Edward, the night caretaker, made his rounds. He was a man who had stopped fearing the dead long ago, but as he passed Margaret's grave, he stopped. Something felt off. The ground was trembling ever so slightly, as if something underneath it was breathing. He leaned on his shovel, frowning. Settling soil, he told himself, happens all the time. Still, he lingered a moment too long, staring at the mound of fresh earth, until lightning flashed across the sky, and for the briefest second, he thought he saw the soil move. When he returned to his shack by the gates, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. He made tea, tried to read, tried to ignore the rain tapping on the windows, but the sound beneath it grew louder, a dull thudding, then silence, then another, coming from the direction of the graveyard. He told himself to ignore it, but Edward was an old man with a stubborn sense of duty. He took his lantern, wrapped his coat tight, and trudged back into the dark. The rain had stopped, but the mist was thick and low, curling over the stones like smoke. When he reached Margaret's grave, he froze. The earth had cracked down the middle. The coffin lid was visible through the wet soil, just barely, and from inside it came a sound that chilled him to the bone. A whisper, so faint he thought it might be the wind. He leaned closer. Who's there? At first, nothing. Then, softly, like a breath against glass, "Please, it's dark." Edward stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern. It couldn't be real. She'd been dead for 3 days. He'd watched them close the lid. He whispered, "You're not alive. You can't be." The voice came again, steadier this time. "I can't breathe. Please, help me." His hands shook. Every instinct screamed to run. But he couldn't leave her like that. Not if there was even a chance she was still alive. He began to dig, throwing wet dirt aside with his bare hands, until the top of the coffin was fully uncovered. The whisper grew louder, frantic now. "Hurry, it's so cold." He pulled at the nails, splintering the wood until the lid creaked open. The lantern flickered. Inside lay Margaret Vale, pale and still, eyes closed. Edward hesitated, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. "Margaret." Her eyes snapped open. He screamed and fell backward, the lantern spilling light across her face. Her pupils were white, clouded like marble, but they moved, searching for him. Her lips parted. "Thank you." Then she smiled. Edward scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, but his legs refused to move. He could only watch as she sat up slowly, her joints popping with each motion. "You heard me," she said softly. "No one ever does." He shook his head, stammering, "You're supposed to be dead." "I was," she said. "They buried me too soon." Her tone was calm, almost gentle. Then she tilted her head. But I'm glad it was you who heard me." He stepped back. "Stay away from me." Her smile widened. "I can't. You brought me back. That means I follow you now." He turned and ran, stumbling through the mud. But every time he looked over his shoulder, she was closer, walking, never running, her bare feet silent on the wet earth. He reached the gatehouse and slammed the door shut, his chest heaving. He pressed his ear to the wood, listening. Silence. Minutes passed. He tried to calm himself, but his breathing came in quick bursts. Then, from behind him, came a voice. "Thank you for letting me out." He spun around. She was standing in the corner of the room, her head slightly tilted, her eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light. Edward pressed his back to the wall. "What do you want?" She smiled again, but it wasn't human anymore. The skin around her mouth tore as she spoke. "I just needed someone to trade places with." Before he could scream, she stepped forward and pressed a hand against his chest. He felt his lungs collapse, his vision blur. The room grew colder, the air thinner. His last breath escaped in a single whisper. By morning, the rain had washed away his footprints from the path. When the groundskeeper came to relieve him, he found the gatehouse door wide open. Inside, sitting at the small wooden table, was Margaret Vale, alive, breathing. Her eyes were calm and clear. In the cemetery, one grave stood freshly covered. No name, no flowers, no cross. But if you leaned close to the dirt, you could swear you heard it. A whisper, faint and pleading. "Please, it's dark." I buried someone who spoke my name. I have buried many people in my life, but only one ever spoke my name. It happened in the winter of 1987, in a town so small it doesn't appear on most maps. I was a gravedigger for St. Mark's Cemetery, a lonely patch of earth, surrounded by pine trees and silence. The dead kept to themselves there, and I liked it that way. But one night, the quiet broke. The call came from the hospital just after midnight. A man named Thomas Hensley, 52, had died of a heart attack. The family wanted him buried before sunrise. Following some old superstition I didn't understand, they paid extra for haste. I didn't argue. By 2 in the morning, the grave was ready, the coffin loaded, the snow falling in thick white sheets. When they brought the body, I noticed something odd. His eyes weren't fully closed. A thin slit of gray showed beneath the lids. I reached down to shut them, but the skin twitched beneath my fingers. A muscle reflex, I told myself. It happens sometimes. Still, the feeling stayed with me, that he wasn't quite gone. The priest said a few short words before leaving me alone with the coffin. The lantern light flickered weakly, throwing shadows across the open pit. I worked quickly, lowering the casket and shoveling snow-caked dirt over the lid. My breath came out in pale clouds. The sound of metal hitting soil was steady, rhythmic, almost calming. Then I heard it, a faint, muffled noise. At first, it sounded like the shifting of wood under weight, the kind of sound a coffin makes as it settles. But then came a voice. "Elias." That was my name. I froze, shoveled midair, the sound echoing inside my skull. I told myself it was the wind, but the voice came again, clearer this time, from under the ground. "Elias." The lantern shook in my hand. I stumbled backward, my boots slipping in the snow. The voice was soft, calm, almost polite. "Please, don't leave me here." I dropped the shovel and ran. By the time I reached my cabin, my lungs burned and my heart felt ready to tear itself apart. I locked the door and sat in the dark for hours, listening to the storm beat against the windows. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that slit of gray under Thomas Hensley's eyelids, that faint hint of awareness. Morning came pale and bitter. I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, imagination, the tricks of a guilty mind. But when I went back to the cemetery to check the graves, I saw the mound I had buried was disturbed, not by animals. The soil had been pushed from the inside. I dug, half against my will, until my shovel struck wood. The lid was cracked open, empty. I searched the grounds in silence, dread coiling in my gut like a living thing. Then, near the north gate, I found the footprints bare, human, pressed deep into the snow, leading away from the grave. I followed them through the fog until they stopped at the caretaker's shed. The door was open. Inside, someone was sitting in the chair by the table. My lantern light fell on a face I knew too well. Thomas Hensley. He was pale, lips cracked, eyes dry as ash, but he was upright, breathing. His head turned toward me with painful slowness. "Elias," he said, voice thin as paper, "you buried me." I backed away, my knees weak. "You were dead." He smiled faintly. "I was close, but I heard you. The sound of your shovel, the weight of the earth." He looked down at his hands. It felt like falling. I couldn't speak. He stood, the movement stiff, unnatural. His bones creaked like wood. "You didn't check," he whispered. "You didn't wait." I stumbled out of the shed, heart hammering, but his voice followed. "You can't leave me again." I ran across the field, the snow swallowing my footsteps, until I reached the chapel. I hid there for hours, afraid to breathe, afraid to move. When I finally dared to step outside, the shed door hung open, and inside it was empty. Only the chair remained, and a single footprint in the snow, pointing toward the graveyard. By dusk, I forced myself to check Thomas's grave again. The coffin was back in place, perfect, untouched. It should have been over. That night, I sat by the window, watching the snow drift past the glass. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps on the door. I didn't move. A voice followed, calm and familiar. "Elias, it's cold out here." I held my breath. The second knock came, slower. "Let me in, please." The sound of the wind faded. All I could hear was the steady rhythm of my own heart. Then, quietly, from the other side of the door, "You buried me alive. It's your turn now." The handle turned. The door opened on its own. And standing there, framed in moonlight, was Thomas Hensley. His skin was gray now, his lips blue, his eyes open wide. He stepped forward, and the smell of earth filled the room. I stumbled back as he spoke, voice breaking like wood. "I kept hearing you," he said. "The shovel, the dirt, the sound of you walking away." He took another step. "Now I'll hear it again. When I cover you." The last thing I saw was his hands reaching toward my throat, cold, trembling, strong. Then the room went black. They found my cabin 3 days later. The snow had drifted inside through the open door. 2 sets of footprints led in. Only one led out. At St. Mark's Cemetery, there is now an unmarked grave beside Thomas Hensley's. The earth above it shifts sometimes, as if breathing. And on quiet nights, when the wind is still, people passing by say they hear something faint beneath the ground. A voice, calling a name. "Elias." I was having a pleasant dream. A green field stretched endlessly around me, under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. I could hear laughter, mine, light and carefree. I hadn't laughed like that in years. For a moment, I felt free, weightless, alive. Then came the first sound. It was faint at first, a slow, dull thud, somewhere far away. Then another, and another. I thought it was part of the dream, someone hammering something in the distance. But with each hit, the sound grew louder, closer, real. The laughter stopped. The sky dimmed. The grass beneath my feet faded to black, and I felt a drop of cold sweat slide down my neck. And then, darkness. I opened my eyes, gasping for air. I was awake, or I thought I was, but I couldn't see anything. Nothing. Just pure, endless black. I reached up instinctively, and my forehead struck something hard, with cold, rough wood, just inches from my face. My chest tightened. I tried to move, but my shoulders hit the sides. My knees hit the bottom. My breath bounced back at me, shallow and fast. The air was thick, heavy, unmoving. I realized where I was, inside a box. No, inside a coffin. My mind screamed, "This can't be real. It's just a dream." But I could feel the splinters digging into my skin. The pressure of the wood, the smell, old, damp, mixed with something metallic. I started to bang my fists against the lid. "Help. Somebody help me." My own voice sounded muffled, trapped. I hit harder. The sound didn't echo. It died instantly, swallowed by the earth above me. Then, from somewhere beyond the coffin, I heard it. A slow, deliberate, metallic tapping. Someone was hammering. They were sealing it, nailing it shut. Each hit sent a vibration through the wood, through my skull, through my bones. I started to kick and scream until my throat tore, until I could taste blood. But the hammer didn't stop. Thud, stop. I'm alive, I screamed. Please, I'm still here. No answer, only the sound of metal meeting wood. I felt tears stream down my face. My fingers clawed at the coffin's lid until my nails split. The wood dug into my palms, but I didn't stop. My chest ached, my lungs burned. I tried to remember the last thing before the dream. The dinner table, the pills, the strange taste of the wine. Had I died? No, I was breathing. I could feel my heart hammering. I was alive, but the hammering continued. And then, silence. Complete silence. I froze. Not even my breath dared to move. I listened. Nothing. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd stopped. Maybe they were digging me out. Then something scratched the lid from the inside. I froze. My own hands were still. I wasn't moving, but something else was. Scratching from above my head. I could feel the wood trembling slightly, like small fingers dragging across it. I whispered, "Who's there?" And then, a whisper came back. ... It was my voice. ... Something pressed gently against the lid. Not a hammer now. A hand, slow, cold, patient. Then I heard nails again, but softer. Inside the coffin. ... Tap, tap, tap. I tried to move, but something held my wrists down. I could feel breath against my ear. Warm, close. A whisper again, so close I could hear the smile in it. "Don't fight it," it said. "We'll rest together now." The air grew colder. My chest stopped moving. The last sound I heard wasn't my scream, but the faint, final strike of the hammer. ... And then, nothing. ... Just dirt. ... Darkness. ... And silence that never ended. The road to my grandmother's house was never supposed to feel haunted. It was a narrow stretch of asphalt winding through tall pines. The kind of place where you could almost hear your own thoughts echoing between the trees. I used to love that silence when I was younger. It felt peaceful, like the world was pausing for a moment just for me. But this time, when I drove down that same road after 10 long years, something felt wrong. The forest looked different. The trees leaned closer, as if whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Even the air felt heavier, thicker, almost aware of me. My grandmother had died 3 months before, leaving her old Victorian house to me, a place I hadn't visited since I was a child. She'd always been strange, with her obsession for mirrors. Every wall, every corridor, every corner of her home had one. As a boy, I thought it was fascinating. As a man, I found it uncomfortable. When I arrived, the house stood exactly as I remembered. Pale yellow paint faded by time, ivy crawling up the porch rails, and that single attic window staring down like an unblinking eye. The front door opened with the same creak it used to, and the smell hit me instantly. Old wood dust, perfume, the faint trace of something floral that didn't belong to any living person. It was exactly as if she were still there. The mirrors greeted me first, lining the hallway like sentinels. Some were cracked, others spotless. As I walked deeper inside, I caught my reflection dozens of times. Each one slightly distorted a trick of the glass, I thought. But one detail made me stop. In one of the mirrors near the living room, my reflection didn't move in sync. When I tilted my head, it hesitated. When I blinked, it stared back, unblinking. I laughed it off, convincing myself it was exhaustion from the drive, or maybe the light, but I couldn't help feeling like something inside that reflection was waiting for me to notice. I spent the next few hours exploring the house, trying to ground myself in nostalgia. The wallpaper was peeling, the floors groaned under my feet, and yet the mirrors were spotless, dozens of them, polished, gleaming, untouched by dust or time. There was one in particular, a large oval mirror in the main hallway. My grandmother used to call it the eye of the house, she said. It saw everything that ever happened here. I used to think it was just one of her creepy stories to keep me from running down the hall. But as I stood there now, looking into that glass, I saw something that froze the breath in my lungs. Behind me, deep in the reflection, There was a figure, tall, pale, standing in the doorway. My pulse surged. I turned around, but the hallway was empty. When I looked back, the figure was gone from the mirror to... For a moment, I stood there staring at my own reflection, convincing myself it had been a trick of the light. But deep inside, I felt that same heavy air pressing down. The same awareness, watching from behind the glass. That night, I decided to stay. Maybe it was foolish, but curiosity always outweighed fear for me. I lit the old oil lamps, since the electricity was unreliable, and walked through each room, one by one. Everything felt suspended in time. Her sewing machine still sat near the window, a half-finished dress draped over it. A cup of tea rested on the table, long dried into a brown ring. It was as if she'd just stepped out and never returned. I stopped by her bedroom last, the door slightly ajar, the smell of lavender still lingering in the air. On her dresser were 3 small mirrors arranged in a triangle. My reflection looked back threefold, slightly delayed, slightly different. I leaned closer, studying each one. The middle reflection smiled. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, the one that didn't belong to me. I told myself it was imagination, that my mind was playing tricks after years away from this place. But the house had a pulse. It breathed in the dark. The old pipes moaned softly. The floors creaked without cause. And sometimes, just before dawn, I swore I could hear a whispering sound, like fingertips brushing against glass. I walked through the halls with a candle in hand, careful not to look too long into any of the mirrors. Every reflection felt heavier, more deliberate, as if they were waiting for me to acknowledge them. At one point, I thought I heard my name, soft, drawn out. I froze in the middle of the hallway, holding my breath. Elias. The voice was old, brittle, almost tender. My grandmother's. I spun around, but there was no one there, only my reflection. Eyes wide, candle trembling in my hand. Morning light did little to calm me. The house was quieter, yes, but the mirrors glistened unnaturally bright, as though they were alive beneath the sunlight. I decided to check the attic a place I had avoided as a child because my grandmother forbade it. That room is for the mirrors, she once said. They rest there. At the time, I thought she was joking, but when I climbed the stairs and opened the heavy attic door, I understood what she meant. The entire space was filled with mirrors, dozens of them, stacked, leaning, some covered with white cloths, others uncovered and gleaming like still water. It was suffocating. I stepped carefully between them, trying not to meet my own gaze. But as I passed one covered mirror, I heard the faint sound of breathing, not mine, slow and steady, coming from behind the cloth. I hesitated, hand trembling, then pulled it away. My reflection was there, of course, pale, wide-eyed, frightened. But behind it, in the depths of the glass, something else stirred. A shadow, faint but undeniable, moving independently of me. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting another mirror, sending it clattering to the floor. The sound shattered the silence, and for a split second, every reflection in the attic flickered. I swear I saw faces, dozens of them pressed against the glass from the inside. Men, women, children, some weeping, some smiling, some with eyes completely black. When the trembling stopped, I stood there in shock, surrounded by broken glass, the candlelight flickering across 1,000 warped reflections. That's when I noticed something else. In the mirror I had uncovered, my reflection wasn't there anymore. The space where I should have been was empty. Just the room and the faint outline of a doorway behind me. Panic overtook reason. I ran down the stairs, barely remembering where my feet landed. The mirrors along the hallway seemed to shimmer as I passed, like water disturbed by an invisible hand. I didn't look into them. I couldn't. When I reached the living room, I collapsed into the old armchair, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. I told myself I was losing it, that grief and exhaustion were twisting my mind. But then I saw something impossible. Across the room, in that great oval mirror my grandmother called the eye of the house, my reflection was standing, but I was sitting. It watched me with a calm expression, head slightly tilted, like it was studying me. Then, slowly, it lifted a hand and placed it against the inside of the glass. The gesture was so gentle, almost compassionate. For a moment, I thought it wanted to comfort me, but then the fingers began to drag across the surface, leaving streaks that looked unmistakably like scratches. And I realized the handprints were on the inside. Morning came again, but the air inside the house was stale, unmoving, as if the walls were holding their breath. I avoided looking at the mirrors entirely. I couldn't stand the thought of seeing something that wasn't me staring back. Instead, I focused on cleaning, convincing myself that keeping busy would help me think clearly. Dusting shelves, folding blankets, rearranging furniture, anything to distract myself from the growing feeling that I wasn't alone. When I reached the library, a small room filled with old books and wooden cabinets, I noticed something odd. The large mirror that once hung above the fireplace was gone. In its place was a faded square mark on the wall where the frame had been. I didn't remember moving it, and I was sure I hadn't seen it in the attic. Curious, I opened one of the drawers beneath the fireplace, and there, under a pile of yellowed papers, was a leather-bound book. My grandmother's handwriting marked the first page. The light between reflections. The entries began decades ago. Most of them were written in the same calm, deliberate script she always used, though the tone changed over time. She wrote about light, glass, and energy, about how mirrors weren't just tools for vanity, but windows to the other side. She believed that each reflection was a barrier, and that when a person looked long enough, their soul left traces, echoes that lingered just beyond sight. One passage chilled me. They watch us through the silver, learning our gestures. When the body dies, the echo waits until someone looks long enough to invite it through. I read that line again and again, my stomach tightening with every word. My grandmother had always been fascinated by the idea of spirits, but this was different. This wasn't belief, it was obsession. The last few pages were written in a shaky hand, as if she'd been terrified while writing them. I have seen her, the one who moves when I do not. The reflection is no longer mine. I closed the book, my hands trembling. The smell of dust and old perfume seemed to thicken in the air. Somewhere behind me, glass creaked softly, like a sigh. I turned slowly toward the doorway. The mirror from the fireplace, the one that had been missing, was there, leaning against the wall. I hadn't heard it being moved, hadn't noticed it before, but now, it stood perfectly upright, angled so that it reflected only me. I took a hesitant step closer, drawn by something I couldn't explain. My reflection looked normal at first, tired, pale, sleepless. But as I studied it, I saw faint movements that weren't mine. My reflection's chest didn't rise when I breathed. Its lips curved slightly when mine did not. Then, behind it, I noticed a shadow. It wasn't in the room, only in the glass, tall and thin, with a head tilted to the side like a curious bird. I stepped back, but the shadow didn't vanish. It grew clearer, closer, until it was standing just behind my reflection, whispering something into its ear. I couldn't hear what it said, but my reflection began to smile wider. Teeth too white, too many. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, and when I looked again, the mirror was empty. My reflection was gone. I ran to the hallway, my pulse pounding. Every mirror I passed now showed something slightly off. In one, my eyes were black. In another, my mouth was open, frozen mid-scream. The further I went, the more they changed, until finally, at the end of the hall, I saw my grandmother's bedroom door open, just a crack. Her voice, faint, fragile, drifted through. "Elias, don't let them out." My heart stopped. I pushed the door open. The 3 mirrors on her dresser were uncovered, their surfaces gleaming unnaturally. For a brief moment, I saw her sitting on the bed, hands folded neatly on her lap, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. But then the image shimmered and dissolved. The bed was empty. The room was cold. The air itself seemed to hum, and as I turned to leave, all 3 mirrors began to shift. My reflection multiplied across their surfaces, each one slightly different, one smiling, one crying, one standing perfectly still while I moved. And then, all at once, they spoke in my voice. "You shouldn't have come back." I don't remember falling to the floor, but when I opened my eyes, I was staring up at the ceiling. My head throbbed, my throat was dry, and my vision blurred in and out of focus. The mirrors on the dresser stood silent again, reflecting only the dim glow of the hallway lamp. For a moment, I convinced myself I had dreamt everything. The whispering voices, the moving reflections, the shadow in the attic, it all seemed impossible. A feverish hallucination born from grief and sleeplessness. I stood slowly, trying to steady my breathing. The house was completely quiet. Too quiet. When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt different, colder, heavier, like a storm waiting to break. I decided I'd had enough. I would leave, go back to the city, sell the house, and never return. That was the plan. But as I walked toward the front door, I saw something that stopped me cold. The mirrors on the wall, all of them were blank. No reflection at all. Not the lamp, not the furniture, not even me. At first I thought it was just the lighting, but when I moved, they didn't. They stood still, like frozen pools of silver. My skin prickled. I stepped closer to one, waving a hand in front of it. Nothing. The surface rippled slightly, as though it were made of water, but it didn't reflect. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement not from the glass, but from inside it. A faint, shadowy figure pacing behind the surface. My heart pounded. I backed away, but the mirror pulsed again, and for the briefest moment, I saw my own reflection return. Only, it wasn't mimicking me anymore. It leaned forward, pressing its hands against the other side of the glass, its eyes wild with hunger. My reflection smiled, that same slow, unnatural grin I'd seen before, and mouthed words I couldn't hear. Then the glass bulged outward, as if something was pushing from within. The surface shimmered, and a hand pale, skeletal pressed against it from the inside. I stumbled back, crashing into a table, sending a lamp shattering across the floor. The light flickered and died, plunging the hallway into half shadow. The hand pushed further, followed by a second, and then a face began to emerge. Mine, but wrong. Its skin shimmered like glass, its eyes hollow, its grin carved too deep. I turned to run, but every mirror in the house came alive at once. The sound, though I can't describe it fully, was like the tearing of fabric and the shattering of water all at once. Figures stepped forward from the glass, each one wearing my face, each one slightly distorted. Some taller, some thinner, some broken at odd angles. Their movements jerky and unnatural. I ran toward the front door, but it wouldn't open. My hand slipped on the handle, slick with sweat, as dozens of footsteps echoed behind me, soft, deliberate, synchronized. I could feel their eyes on my back. When I turned, they had stopped just a few feet away. All of them stood perfectly still, lining the walls like silent mannequins. And then, one by one, they began to tilt their heads to the side, the same eerie motion, mirrored perfectly across the line. The air vibrated, the lights flickered, and I heard my grandmother's voice again. Everywhere and nowhere at once. The house remembers. Elias, the mirrors never forget. The reflections stepped closer, and I saw that their mouths were moving in unison, whispering the same phrase over and over, something I couldn't understand. My knees buckled. My vision swam. I reached for the wall to steady myself and touched cold glass instead. I looked up. There was a mirror where the wall should have been. But this time, I saw something different inside. Not reflections. A room. The same hallway, empty, silent, waiting. And inside that mirrored world, one of the versions of me turned, smiled faintly, and reached out a hand, as if inviting me in. I don't remember what happened next. The last thing I felt was a sudden rush of air, as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. Then silence. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing upright, but everything looked wrong. The world shimmered faintly, like light passing through water. I looked around and saw the hallway, the furniture, the walls, all exactly as before, yet distant, hollow. And then I saw him, the real me, standing outside the mirror, staring back. He touched the glass curiously, tilting his head. I tried to scream, to call out, to warn him, but no sound came. My hands pressed against the inside of the mirror, and the truth hit me like a knife to the chest. I was the reflection now. He smiled my smile and turned away, leaving me behind. The house grew still. Dust floated through the air, settling on old wood and cold glass. In every mirror, faces watched quietly, waiting for the next person to look too long.